Have you ever wondered what public policy really means and how it shapes the world around you? Welcome to Primus Cut,
a series where we cut through the clutter
to unpack policies transforming the way we live,
work, and govern.
Each episode, we bring you insights from our in-house experts and thought leaders to understand
what's changing, why it matters,
and what it means for you.
Let's begin. In this first episode of Primus Cut, we have with us Mr. Nilaya Varma, the co-founder and group CEO of Primus Partners.
With over 25 years of experience, Nilay has worked in public policy, business, and government projects and has been at the intersection of ideas, implementation, and impact. Today, we are going to delve into his journey, understand the lessons he has learned, and share his perspective on where India stands and where it's headed at. Thank you, Nilay, for agreeing to do this on a Saturday. I know you've been very busy.
Yeah, thank you so much for having. And Mayuri, thank you so much for calling me Mr. Varma. That's the maximum amount of respect that I've ever seen coming from you. I love it. Thank you so much.
Most welcome, Nilaya, most welcome. Nilaya, we would also want to thank you for one thing. The idea of Primus Cut actually came from a conversation that you've had. You posted this podcast of how one of our TLs was converted into a conversation by an AI. And we also wanted to take that step and take that base forward and try to create something like this, where first thing that we want to debunk is a policy for that month. And the second thing is that we wanted to also put in RTLs in front of the public, specifically those who are moving into the field of public policy. And today is the first episode, so we want to go back to the basics. We want to understand what public policy really means to you.
Yeah. I think public policy to me essentially means aligning all the stakeholders for common good. That's really public policy. Because very often we tend to look policy from one particular lens, maximizing revenue, increasing jobs. Well, yes, those are important, but what about the other stakeholders? Because today, any outcome cannot be achieved by the government themselves. There has to be public acceptance, there has to be tangible benefit, there has to be private participation, and more importantly, it has to have evidence and data. And that's really what we are working at Primus when we speak about public policy.
So, you know what? I really want to take this idea that you said that, it's about aligning stakeholders for a common good. But for instance, like I am very new to public policy. I didn't have a base in public policy. But when I think of public policy, I think public policy in India has like a colonial hangover, wherein we have these Western school of thoughts about economies, governance, market. Do you see a difference in the way public policy is taught when it's in India vis-a-vis how it's taught, say by the Western school of thinking?
I think the fundamental philosophy and underlying principle of public policy does not change in the way it is taught, but the application of the same varies dramatically from geography to geography. In the context of India, till very recently, public policy was all about whom do I know?
Yeah.
What can I tell them? If I know the boss, things get done. But we've realized over a period of time that more and more people want evidence. Just because you know somebody does not mean it gets done. And that goes back to the fundamental of public policy, which is what I said about ensuring alignment among stakeholders for common good. And therefore, economics comes into picture, the policy makers come into picture, the overall aspiration, vision, leadership of the of the country, as well as the leadership of the people who are in power. All of that come into picture.
Yeah. So, I'm going to take what you said and just to sort of take it a little bit forward. Now, like I've said, you have worked in this field for over 25 years. You've been at the helm of large government mandates. You've managed the Vibrant Gujarat Summit. But when you personally look at public policy and, given your experience, what sort of was like an enabler for you to say that, listen, this is a gap, and to solve this gap, I'm going to start Primus? Was there like an aha moment for you?
really wasn't an aha moment, but there are two or three instances that come to my mind when you ask me that question, Sachi. When we were setting up Primus Partners, we weren't sure about public policy as an offering.
Really?
Yeah, we had no idea it's
Yeah.
gonna do so well that we would be seen as a leading public policy firm in India.
Oh,
We really did not have any idea for a very simple reason. Many of us, the founders, had really not worked substantially with the private sector.
correct.
Whereas almost every client of ours
Hmm.
today at Primus in public policy is the private sector. Yeah. I think what really has worked are two or three things. Number one, we are management consultants by heart.
Yeah.
Our training, our DNA. So therefore, everything is about problem solving. And the moment you think about problem solving as the fundamental, you say, okay, what is the problem? So defining the problem itself becomes important. I also think, given the fact that many of us have spent a lot of time in the public sector, it gives us a insight, or we can mimic the public sector reasonably well.
But when you say mimic the public sector, do you mean you can think the way the government thinks, or is it more to say that you understand how stakeholders respond to certain?
Both of them. Look, end of the day, I've had the privilege of working with a lot of people in the public sector, great leaders. But very often, it's just a human thing. Most of us are risk averse, and in the public sector, we are even more risk averse
Yeah.
because the chances of doing nothing or the outcome of doing nothing versus doing something which goes wrong, the impact are two very different things. It makes people risk averse. And that understanding of why would a public servant take a risk to take up a new initiative, take up a new policy, etc. And I think that has really helped us. And that's why we advise many of our clients to say, look, I think what you're saying is right, but the instrument that you've chosen or the way you want it done is wrong because that's what's not going to work. And that's where our understanding of public sector becomes very, very relevant.
Okay, so taking that Indian way of solving problems,
Hmm.
right? Very recently, the government has pushed for the Indian Big Four, creating Indian Big Fours. 2017 was sometime years back when Narendra Modi ji has spoken about creating Indian Big Fours. And I think that was kind of a stepping stone for Primus.
I think obviously we were very inspired. If I'm honest, we weren't sure we were ready when we started off. Maybe back of our mind, we believed because we were inspired with the vision of the Prime Minister. And there are many reasons why we were inspired. But yes, as you guys know, we started with what, 12, 13 people. We are 400 people today. We service clients around the world. So the biggest global clients are clients of Primus Partners. You're traveling to the US for the project there. So, later this week for a client. So yes, we've grown. Today we do believe we can be that, and there are two or three fundamental reasons for that. As an organization, we were very clear from day one. This organization is not about individual, but about creating an institution. And therefore, it wasn't Nilaya Varma and Company or a Ravinder Sandhu and Company or a Nilaya Ravinder and Company. It was always Primus Partners. It wasn't about the individual. Second, growing up in consulting, right? We always used to talk about international best practices or international good practices. Increasingly, I find in conversation with clients around the world, uh, Indian good practices. I've just coming back this morning from Dubai, and I've had wonderful conversation with very, very senior people in the private sector and as well in the public sector. They want to understand how do you guys do transformation at scale. And I think there are lots of Indian good practices to do. And third, I think the time is right because till some time back, across the world, and while I'm a very proud Indian, around the world, we were either seen in certain parts of the world as people who are providing manpower for
Hmm.
low-end jobs or really about IT coding,
Yeah.
but increasingly we're seen as people who can solve problems, people who can look beyond.
Yeah.
And if you see the number of Indian Americans or Indians who've done their schooling in India and doing very well globally. I think there is an acceptance of Indian expertise, and therefore I think time is right for an Indian Big Four.
Then how do you make this localize? For example, you have something like the choice, which is Primus's biggest solution. How would you take that to a global scale? Like how would you localize it to say an American market or something in Dubai? How would you implement that?
I think it's an important thing, and I will make a distinction here, Mayuri. I think the problems by and large are global. Implementation of many of or the pathways to solving those global problems are local. And our investments in our solution has always been about solving the bigger problem. Yes, we would need to customize. Let me give you one example. You spoke about choice, which is really our platform for addressing, I wouldn't call it universal basic income, but ensuring that every citizen, every resident has a dignity to life. I say this more often now. If democracies have to survive, a basic minimum income is a reality that we need to embrace sooner than later. And choice, and that is across the world, because the divide between rich and poor, haves and have not, and yet accessibility and the amount of information every one of us has reduced. And therefore, whether it's US, whether it's China, whether it's India, whether it's Brazil, whether it is Saudi, everywhere, I believe that problem exists, and choice essentially is trying to address that problem. And therefore, coming back to your question, I think the problems are uh, global. Solution has to be local, and that's where we will work with. I can give you another example. Every large economy today has one form or the other of a make in India. America first, uh, somebody else would say Vietnam would say China plus one strategy. Everybody wants to do it. So it's all about attracting investments. And that's where our expertise of Invest IQ comes into play. Now, it has to be done differently in different markets, but the problem we are addressing is the same. And yeah, so you talked about Vibrant Gujarat. Again, something that our Prime Minister, when he was a Chief Minister, initiated that it had the vision of driving investments into the country, into the state, I would say. And therefore, we have the expertise which we now want to do it at a global scale.
So, you said that choice and your beliefs on universal basic income. Now, one thing that I also feel is for a young person who's like entering into the policy space, very often when we, look at newspapers, when we look at magazines, even when we look at any news, you see there are editorials which are full of saying that, probably universal basic income as an idea or as in policy is excellent, it's brilliant. But somewhere we always, stumble in our implementation. Why do you think does it happen in India? Like, where do you think the gap exists?
Yeah, very tough question, Sakshi. Um, and I'll answer that question, but there's something that you said I need to respond in a different way.
Okay.
Um, where you said young people, right? The assumption was that the wisdom lies only if you've spent a lot of time or if you're senior. One of my bosses used to say, everyone has something to learn and everyone has something to teach. So I do believe it doesn't matter whether you're young or not, you can all contribute to the solution. To come back to your question,
Hmm.
there is this phrase, and I do not know who coined it or where was it first time used, but it essentially says what brings you to the top doesn't necessarily help you to remain at the top. I think the challenges with what you have talked about is these are brilliant concepts at a point in time, but we haven't improved or worked upon them over a period of time.
So, do you think then in such cases, policy, how do I say this? Like, policy as a tool is, we always believe that it's quite dynamic, but there are some core, like, underlying ideas that always remain the same over the years. So, in such cases, what does those core idea like?
My sense is governance. uh, is a core idea.
But even governance keeps changing.
The manner in which you implement governance,
Oh, okay.
it keeps changing, but the fundamental of what governance means,
Hmm.
it means basic dignity to life,
Yeah.
rule of law,
Hmm.
to be able to not just get justice but get timely justice. Some of those things about governance does not change.
True.
Accessibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, but we may deliver it more electronically today than we were doing before. We may be asking for 10 information
Hmm.
10 years back. Today we do not because we have that. So form changes, but not what our expectations are. And I think in policy, we often have to ask the question, what's the intent of this policy? And very often, the moment you ask that question, you often have to define in a very clear manner outcomes,
Yeah. Like a tangible outcome to it.
tangible outcome. And also, traditionally, governments have been very good at managing and driving supply side.
Yeah.
It's often very difficult to manage demand, but for good policy, it has to be demand driven, not supply oriented thinking.
Yeah.
A lot of things to learn.
But I have to say, I've now worked with both of you for a while now. I often learn just having these conversations with you guys because you would say something which would force us to think. And I think the challenge today I see is we do not think enough. And therefore, something that you guys haven't asked me, but I'm going to talk about is Primus research. And something I'm particularly proud of because we as a management team did this, and I took the initial initiative of driving it. Growing up in consulting, we would often refer to and talk about point of view consulting. And what was point of view? You go into a meeting. You don't tell somebody senior to say, "Oh well, I will do an as-is analysis, then we will do a 2B, and then I'll come with a solution." He really wants to understand if you have the experience and he trusts you, what can you do for me or what's your thinking? And that thinking comes through a point of view, and that point of view comes through research. And us as an organization, we're about 400 people, with each one of us, including me, you, uh, all of us spending 200 hours. That's about 80,000 hours every year that is done to research, which is not paid for or on behalf of the client. And I think that really is the organization that we want to build or the base on which we want to build.
I'm going to put you on spot here and ask, do you have like a favorite TL of yours?
Honestly speaking,
And India at 47 is not
It does too
no, no,
proud.
no. India at 47 is not the answer.
uh, it's very tough to choose. But you've already given the option. Mayuri was part of the team which did India at 47. I think I love telling stories, right? Because that's also a competency that we young people need to have storytelling. But many years back, I was bidding for a project for transformation of urban local bodies. It was a project which was funded by USAID, and we won that project. And during the debrief, the person on the other side uh, took out a 100, I think, 200-page proposal focused on a paragraph which essentially, where we essentially said, we're not going to do this because we're going to learn from experiences. Here is the three things that we believe we can learn from and move forward. And he says, that's the reason I chose you, because that's what you said. In a 200-page proposal, those were the 3, 4 lines that appealed to him. The reason why I'm giving this story is very often small things make a big difference. And in all our TLs, we try and make that one small change. For example, India in 2047. What was the change? We said, how do we define the people who live in India? I think the SEC classification is a very marketing oriented definition, and therefore we created those 24 personas. So that was brilliant. I think some of our recent TLs that we're talking about, when we're talking about the creative economy, I think we are making a point of view. We may be 100% correct, we may be 80% correct, but we are putting ourselves out and said, given a choice, given the right environment, we believe this can happen. And if we were given the mandate, we'll try and work to make it happen.
Yeah.
I mean, just to add to the 24 persona questions, I will. Um, I mean, when
Yeah,
we were,
take the credit.
no,
It's okay. I did it, but you implemented it. Take the
to be honest, when the entire India was thinking about Viksit Bharat from the economic point of view, right, we started thinking about it from the personal, persona based,
User point of
yeah,
view. Yeah.
point of view. And it was quite interesting, and it's still used now. Like the 24 personas are used across RTLs. And we kind of like, even if it's a broad based topic that we are looking at, we always come back to that person, right? Like to the end user. How is that person impacted? And yeah, like that was a amazing experience.
I honestly tell you, Mayuri, Sakshi, people remember when you give them new ideas. I have so many clients of mine who became friends over a period of time, and it started with a small conversation where some where I may have said something ridiculous, which came out to be true, and they can never forget about it.
So, this conversation has been great. And now that we are approaching the last segment, you've called us like the certified Gen Z members of the
And
office.
I'm
So,
not. I'm not a Gen Z, just to be
do you
honest.
know what Gen Z starts, by the way?
I'll have to ask my daughters.
96.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah.
Look, my younger daughter is Gen Alpha. I believe it
Yeah.
starts at 2008.
2008.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
We also have the Gen Z in the board, right?
Yeah, the Gen Z member.
Yeah.
Do you think that also helps bring in like a fresher perspective?
Look, again, I go back to some of the things that have impacted me growing up. First of all, Primus, or what we're doing at Primus, has been, and I've said this before, I'm trying to live my life of what I wanted for myself when I was growing up in consulting. That's really what I'm trying
Yeah.
to do.
And that's why you sit on this side of the
Yeah,
office, on our
yeah,
side of the
Yeah,
office.
yeah. For people who do not realize, so we have two sides of the office where some of the senior members, especially the working team members, sit, and the other is you guys. My office is on your side.
Yeah. I thought it was for fun and gossip.
Yeah, that also because you guys are very loud outside my room when you're having your break, and I do understand the gossip very, very well.
We have to be careful, yeah.
Absolutely, but yeah, what was the question?
Yeah, so
The Gen Z board.
yeah, the Gen
Gen,
Z.
Gen Z word. I think today, and I'm blessed in that sense. Although I'm not young, but I do have two young daughters.
And you have a young heart.
Well,
Hmm.
I don't know what you meant with that.
Stopped aging at 25.
We'll take that off the record, because otherwise we'll have to go to our offsite, and then I have far more footage of you guys
Oh
than
no.
you have of me. But coming back, I think fundamentally young people think differently. Me growing up, coming from a middle class family with an extremely honest and a hardworking father and a mother who was extremely rich, I saw both sides of the story very early in my life. But one of the things today is when we used to grow up, we were very scared because India was still not where it is. I've had to stand in the queue trying to get a gas cylinder back home, okay, which you guys don't even understand what it means. But today, the young people really are far more confident and therefore think very differently, both in private life as well as in corporate life. They do not necessarily believe in hierarchy, even if they, and therefore, if we build an organization which is supposed to service tomorrow, and Gen Z is our tomorrow, and we build a very hierarchical organization, you guys will be very uncomfortable. And what is the best way to make sure we can break those barriers? Bring the Gen Z into the highest level of decision making in the country, in the company which is at the board.
Yeah. But now, Nilay, if like I had to ask you that, what was that one piece of advice that you would give to your younger self who is probably just entering consulting or policy? What would that be?
Yeah, don't think too much, just work hard and ask yourself, am I learning something every day? As long as you keep doing that, you're going to do well in life. I think we overthink, especially young people, overthink far more than some of us do, which is fair because I think that's part of how we grow up. But that's the advice. And learning is not necessarily did you learn a tool on Excel? Did you learn to code? Learning is how did I react? Learning about yourself. When do you react? How do you react to a situation which is positive, negative? And then, as long as you're learning, you're doing it. I can, if I give one more example, in my first job outside post my MBA, I used to work with India's first development financial institution. I, you know, we had fancy designations, so within 1 year, I was a manager. And my general manager, an extremely tough boss, um, asked me for whatever reason to say that look, my assistant basically would connect phone calls and will make sure that the industrialists were waiting in this room prior to meeting the general manager. Would you? He was going on a long leave for a month. He says, "Can you sit and do your work from this room?" Which essentially meant a manager was being downgraded to a telephone operator. I don't know why, but I said yes. My friends called it I was brown nosing, but I don't know. But some of the biggest learning in my life came from that episode. Why? Because very, very senior promoters, founders uh, used to come spend sometime 30 minutes, 45 minutes with me. I had the opportunity to talk to them. I could see how a general manager would react or take these meetings up close. This was my first or second year of my career in the corporate world. Yeah. And some of those learning made the person I am today. And it would not have happened if I would have used the traditional definition of learning to say, this is downgrading. I'm an MBA. Why would I take up the phone call and connect? Not saying that that's what we should do all our life, but we shouldn't miss the opportunity to learn, and it comes every day to all of us.
And how would you describe yourself back then? If you had to just look back and
Three
think
three
about
adjectives. Yeah.
like you're stepping into that particular role. It's the first time in the consulting and the public policy space.
I was always curious. Growing up in a small town in Allahabad, I wasn't very good at academics at that particular point of time.
And you
I,
chose engineering.
don't ask me that.
Was it your
I refuse to answer that question. I don't remember anything in engineering, but I will answer part of one thing that I learned in engineering. But I was very curious. I grew up in a place where I wasn't. I At least my parents didn't think I was so good, and therefore I had this need to prove myself all the time, and therefore I would work harder than anybody else. So curious, hardworking, and always willing to accept others' viewpoint first before putting my judgment on top of it. I think those were the things, and I don't think I've fundamentally changed as a person even today. Um, Coming back to the engineering part, there's one thing that I still remember of engineering, and there's very little I remember of engineering. Is in electronics, we would have a subject or a concept called a feedback loop, which essentially says that for any electronic, any electrical, any system, even form of governance, for it to be stable, there needs to be a feedback loop which autocorrects the system. And that has stuck to me. And that's why very often after a all hands call, after an important call, or after an important meeting, I'll go back to you guys to say, what could have you done better? Many of you tell me that I do that to hear praise about how well I did, but really that's the reason I do.
So, you know what, me and Mayuri actually had this question that, you know, like you said, Primus is now 400. We have over 400 employees, and I'm sure we'll have 800,000 more and more. But our question to you was supposed to be, you know, how are you going to make sure that the authenticity and the culture of Primus always stays the same? And I'm assuming the answer is somewhere on the lines of feedback loop, but
Yeah, yeah, but it has to be beyond feedback loop. I think I think the culture has to be institutionalized. And today, last year or rather this year, we've made that transition where I'm no longer looking at the India practice they group is, but I'm there in the system and making sure that all of us have signed in to the basic culture of the organization. And over a period of time, every leader starts to believe in that, and every manager looks up to their leader, and it becomes institutionalized. Obviously, policies have to be. For example, uh, we do not have a bell curve. A lot of our initial people came from Big Four. I'm from a Big Four. The initial 13 people, all of them were from Big Four. And we've grown using a bell curve. And the question that they would ask us, or initial set of people would ask us to say, how would you judge performance? Right? We do not have a bell curve, and we're doing exceedingly well. And the logic, and now those are policies which drive a culture of the organization. And many people have asked us, so why don't you have bell curve? There are many reasons, but one of the fundamental reasons that I have is if you were a client and Primus was servicing you and you had a 10-member team, would you tell the client that I have two one raters, four two raters, and another four three raters, and you're paying the same money for all of them? It doesn't work. And therefore, but that as a policy is right, but what does that mean in reality? The standard deviation to acceptable performance has to be very, very negligible. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I think I studied that in MBA. I don't remember it. Yeah, but reality is, so that's why we try for all our employees a minimum acceptable performance, right? And we will give them as many opportunities within a well-defined period of time in case they need support. But if in case they cannot, we'll also say that look, you probably have a better career outside of finance.
and I think the last question, which I'm very personally looking forward to, is
Just before that, I hopefully once we crossed 1,000, we still maintain the offsites together.
I absolutely again.
will you take all 1,000 though?
So far we've done that, right?
Yeah, we
We've
are.
taken every employee outside. Again, it's the dream that I had. I mean, when I joined my first consulting gig, only the MDs or partners would go to these fancy locations. And I was a consultant. I thought I worked very, very hard for the high salaries that the partners made. And I wanted to be part of that, right? And so that's why first, while yes, we travel a lot in India, we're very proud, but it's also aspirational for a lot of middle class Indians to travel outside the country, and that's why we do international travel. Many of our workforce now doesn't come from metros; it comes from tier two towns, tier three towns. I think both of you are from tier two towns, right? Yeah, and therefore we do international travel, and then everybody travels, including uh, our office boys.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. And another thing is that we kind of like meet people that we are meeting virtually over meetings.
Yeah.
We actually put a face to them and start hanging out and have that proper conversation with them, and it's an experience altogether.
Absolutely. I'm often amazed, though, Mayuri, that you guys still remember the face even after 18 hours of partying. So brilliant. Yeah, that talks about the capacity of the Gen Z, I would say.
It's you leading from the top. That's
We
it.
learn from the best.
Yeah, we learn from the best.
But yeah, coming back to the final question, which I'm personally very excited for. Um, how realistic do you think the India at 47 vision is?
Look, I think a vision is a directional thing.
Yeah.
I think to that extent, I think every Indian aspires to that. Because for every Indian, and that's what our study showed, that every Indian sees Viksit Bharat from a very different lens. It's not the traditional lens of a per capita income, which a high income country does. It looks at it very different. And therefore, I think it's wonderful. Now, will we meet the benchmark of per capita income? I don't know, hopefully 5 years before or maybe 3 years later. But the reality is that directionally, that this is what we want for each and every Indian is wonderful. But before we end, I have a couple of questions, and I do not have a cue card.
Take as.
No, no. But really, Mayuri, I'm sure you have friends outside of the firm, right? What is the kind of conversation that you guys have? I know you guys do not talk shop, yeah, but once in a while you do. What do you hear young people say about the companies that they work with, and especially their managers?
For me, we mostly talk about politics, but when it comes to I'll just tell you what I feel when it comes to, maybe it may not answer your question, but somewhere relate
You
to
never
that.
answer my questions. Yeah.
But I always thought when I talk on Primus, I talk about one thing, that is, it takes me back to my boarding school, and in a very good way, because in my boarding school we used to fight for this RB Mega trophy, and that is to be every year. We were divided into hostels, and we would actually feel to earn that trophy, right? We used to, like, work hard, and I feel exactly the same in Primus. Maybe because of the fact that we work so closely with you, and it's an
Yeah,
everyday.
but you guys hardly see me.
Now it's, yeah,
Virtually,
yeah,
virtually.
but it's, you're always available, right? Like, that's there. uh, it's it's that, like, for me, everything that is that I go, like, every morning that I go to office, I know there's something new that's coming to my plate,
Yeah.
and I'm working for it. I don't think that's something that the others are
Yeah.
experiencing, and that's something that they don't have a conversation about.
Hmm.
Or today we worked on the 24 personas, tomorrow we're working on an event, tomorrow day after we're working on a TL. So that's,
Yeah.
every day there's something new happening, and that's the gap that I see. Because in that side of the table, it's more about them being on the, they're not being able to express their ideas and
Hmm.
thoughts in a very, if they have an input, it's very, it's stopped at a particular level. For us, it's an open conversation. Like, we have an open door policy, and we go and we
Yeah.
tell you that this is not working out, this is working out, but what do you have to say? And that's something that is missing there. So I think that's.
So, Sakshi, let me ask you a question. You know, you've been a LAMP fellow, so you've worked with parliamentarian, wherein the hierarchy is extreme. Yeah, you're also an expressive Gen Z. Yeah, you don't mind people know what's on your mind. Very often, one of the questions some of us at our level or age would talk about is to say, how do you balance open door, being blunt, being factual, not minding expressing yourself, with the respect that you need to show to somebody on the other side, purely because, not so much because they have the designation, but because of their experience. Does these things work in your mind? Does it even cross your mind?
Yeah, and you know what? This is one thing that I so vividly remember. There was this one time that we were sitting in the conference room, and you had told me that consulting for you is not about, it's always about putting yourself in the other person's shoes and thinking from their perspective. And I think it just hit home, like, because, like you said, I think me, I don't think I should make that generalization for Gen Zs, but yeah, I think we are more open towards communication and conversation. I don't think we necessarily find it difficult to express our thoughts. I think that's just how our generation has been, because it's just the way it works. But I think learning or hearing that from you, that, always put yourself in other perspective and always put yourself in other person's shoes, understand where they come from, and then sort of apply it to, what you were thinking. I think that is where that difference comes from. Because even at Primus, I think, when, like Mayuri said, you have an open door policy. And I know that if I am facing any trouble, I can approach you, I can approach Devroop, I can approach any of the MDs, to be, frank. And I know that all of you will help me. But it's also to say that I will always understand the fact that where you are coming from is will always be from a mature perspective, and I need to sort of understand and inculcate that in my point of view and thoughts.
So, is that a wrap?
Yeah, I think that's a wrap.
I
So
think
thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for doing this, and and thank you for giving me a couple of hours of thing. I mean, actually, to be fair, yesterday you guys told me that I need to come today. So thank you so much for giving me at least about 24 hours notice.
I don't think you need even 24 hours. A 1 hour
You are-
intimation should have worked for you, Nilay.
But thank you, Nilaya. Thank you so much. We've had such a great
Yeah.
conversation.
You're supposed to say that, right?
Yeah, we are.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.